start all over again. Okay, so this session is designing for the Office 365 experience. We're going to talk about branding for Office 365. Now, the great thing is that a lot of the concepts that I'm going to talk about work on premises as well as Office 365. So it's not something that's limited, but it is focused towards Office 365. Who am I? My name is Cathy, senior engineer at Planet Technologies, basically a fancy name for consultant. I'm a SharePoint MVP. I've been working with SharePoint from a branding perspective for over 6 years. I actually started with SharePoint 2003, and I have to tell you, we've come a long way, a long way. Wrote a book on SharePoint 2010. CatPaint1 on Twitter, SharePointCat.com is my blog. Really, sometimes. If you just put the words SharePoint and cat together, you usually will end up with me somehow. So what we're going to talk about in this is what are the different options for Office 365? How do we choose what we're going to do? We're going to talk about customizing a master page, right? I'm going to talk a little bit about the design manager. We're actually going to do some demos around customizing master pages. We're actually going to attempt, you'll see why. We're going to attempt to import in an HTML designed site into SharePoint through the design manager, see what it does. We're going to talk a little bit about custom composed looks. If you were in Heather and Penny's session earlier this morning, Bland to Brand, we talked about composed looks in there. I'm actually going to take it further. So what is it from that? How do I keep going? What do I do to extend it even further beyond what they talked about this morning? We're going to talk about creating packages, the different methods for how do I package up my SharePoint design, and then we're going to talk about deploying and applying. I have no idea why my little toolbar is appearing down across the bottom of my PowerPoint, and I'm sorry, it's covering up a little bit of the stuff, but figure it out. You can see what we're going to use. We're going to use Dreamweaver and PowerPoint and Notepad and Internet Explorer. So Office 365 for SharePoint, right? I have to tell you, this part here confuses the crap out of me. The different plans and what the options are and what I can do and what I can't do just confuses me. And there's all kinds of charts out there, and I honestly, trying to find out what type of site I needed to do this demo, I had to call them. And I think that's just sad. I couldn't figure it out, but here are all the different, well, not all of the different, there's many more, but here's what I think are some of the key things that we need or that we might want to use for SharePoint branding. Things like the design manager. Can we do metadata-driven navigation? Because that's a huge thing in SharePoint 2013. What about cross-site publishing? What can we do? Can we do farm solutions, sandbox, public website? What do we have? So I actually detailed it out in here, but I'm not going to go through all of these because honestly it's just boring, right? So there's multiple types. Office 365 Small Business, Office 365 Small Business Premium. So we get real creative with naming. Office 365 Mid-Size Business. And then you have all your E1, P1, E2, P2, G, K, alphabet soup plans, right? As you go through, there were multiple of them, and I just got tired of writing the same slide over and over and over again with one or two words different. So if you want it, Andrew Connell has a great blog post out there with an Excel chart that's got all the different features for all the different plans. Go download it. It's great, color-coded. It's fantastic. Is the site that we're looking for, when we're talking about Office 365, right, we get a public-facing site. So maybe we want to use that. We also can do intranet. So we have to determine what type of site we're going to do. And then from that, what are our options for how we're going to customize it? So the easiest thing to do to customize an Office 365 site is a composed look, right? Those new themes for Office 365 are easy. If you go out and you have a public-facing site and it loads up and you look at what that is with the image in the background and all of that, that's a composed look. We can customize that. We can also do our custom master pages, CSS, page layouts. You'll notice I didn't include page layouts down at the bottom because it depends on whether or not you have publishing as to whether or not you have those, right? So how do we pick what we're going to do? I'll be honest, I haven't actually used composed looks for a customer yet. I think they have a lot of great potential, but everything that people come to me for is obviously beyond something that typical, somebody could figure out how to do on their own. So I've done quite a few custom master page CSS page layouts so far with 2013. Design Manager is there. Design Manager is there. Device channels. We talked a little bit about those in the last session. They're a great theory and concept. I don't use them. Compose looks, like I said, the new themes for SharePoint 2013. I love how every few years they change the name again, right? So it's now a compose look, and if you want to find it, you go change the look, right? It's made up of a master page, color palette, CSS, font palette, and background image. There's also a preview file. So you could pick one of the out-of-the-box ones, right? And they gave us some, and I have to say, I have to admit, typically I give Microsoft a really hard time for giving me things out of the box that make my eyes bleed. Like the 2013 or 2010 and 2007 themes were just painful, right? So these aren't quite as bad. They did a little bit better job with these. I think they hired in a new design team. I'm not sure. They're a little bit better. They don't quite make my eyes bleed. But they're still kind of bland, blah, generic, right? Create your own. We talked about this morning already, so I'm not going to go into a ton of it. But you basically have to define all the options, right? Define our custom master page. Our theme URL is our color palette. Our image URL is if we want a background image. That one I showed you before had that wood picture in the background. And then our font scheme URL down at the bottom. So create custom everything. It sounds great, right? Let's make it all custom. Sounds great. They gave us this idea in SharePoint 2013 of the Design Manager. Has anybody used the Design Manager? Have you imported in an HTML site? No? A couple? Okay. Was anyone surprised by what it did or what it didn't do? Yeah. We'll see what it looks like in here. But they gave us this magic concept. You get the Design Manager, go out and create your site in Dreamweaver and import it. And it was like it was going to automatically become SharePoint when I imported it in. It's a great concept, and it works fairly well. I will give it that if you want to spend a good bit of time in it. We're going to spend some time in it today, right? Because I think it's a great thing to know. It's a great thing to look at. It's great to kind of figure out why you might not use it. Just being honest. So you go into the Design Manager, and it gives us a couple of feel-good screens, like it welcomes us, and it tells us that you can manage your device channels, and it says, upload your design files. That sounds great. How do I do that? So I go in here to my Design Manager, edit master pages, and I want to convert an HTML file to a SharePoint master page. Woohoo. So I go browse to it, right? And I say convert. And I promise that more likely than not, this will be your result right here. Warnings and errors. So you're going to do that. You're going to go to try to see it. It's probably not going to preview anything because there's warnings and errors. You're going to have to resolve them. A few times, you get a conversion successful, and you get to start playing with it, right? So I'm actually going to live demo how this works in just a minute. So it's great. Right? If you look at the Design Manager, I didn't go through all of these, but you can see underneath that is the display templates, and then below that is the page layouts. There is a difference between a display template and a page layout. Page layouts are our traditional ideas. Display templates are, you might use them, you might not. Some people are really using them. You can change some of the way lists work and the modals work and some of that. Search results, some of those things, they've changed them to display templates instead of page layouts. So display templates, it's kind of hit or miss as to whether or not you're going to use them. They function a lot of the same way, customizing them as page layouts do, to me. And then you get the final down at the end. We have a few options that we're going to go through after we play with our master pages, right? So how do we import it? Well, first, you have to get your files there to import it. Guess what? It doesn't browse to my computer to go get them. That would be too easy. So within my master page gallery, right, I have an HTML site that I want to import. So I went in and I created my folder. So here I have a folder, evolution. Within it, I have my images, my HTML, my CSS. I actually took this before I dragged the CSS in there. right? So that we have that in there. Then we come to our little create button. We browse to that, and we upload it. And if we're lucky and the conversion is successful, we might see something that looks like this, right? It looks great, right? One small problem. None of this is SharePoint, right? It imported it, it converted it, it made it HTML. It was already HTML. What it doesn't know how to do is take our HTML and assign it the appropriate SharePoint control that we're supposed to have. So here I designed with the concept in mind of a top navigation and a left navigation, but they're not SharePoint controls. So how do we do that? We have to use the snippet gallery, right? Sounds great. Sounds like a wonderful thing. Snippet gallery, fantastic, right? They also tell us when we're doing that, and we want to edit those files in the future, that HTML that we just created, right? That they want me to map that master page gallery folder to my local machine. Guess what doesn't work well with Office 365? Mapping a drive to your local machine. You could do it if you want to change every security setting to make it work. So for me, I actually open that folder in Windows Explorer view, and then I can do whatever I want with it, because it's a Windows Explorer view, right? So they're going to tell you to map it, and even in the master page where it says upload master page, it says map this drive, and it gives you the fancy little URL, and you go try to do it, and you're just going to get frustrated because you're going to follow all the steps that are supposed to work, right? They even give you like a little help file. Go follow this. It tells you how to do it. Yeah, I could never get it to work, ever. It worked great for on-premise solutions, by the way, but Office 365, just open in Windows Explorer view. So I actually used Dreamweaver in this presentation. I never thought I would do that. And I used Dreamweaver instead of Visual Studio because I thought more people might be exposed to Dreamweaver instead of Visual Studio. When I do this at home for customers, I use Visual Studio. So here's my master page gallery. I've imported, look, I now have an evolution.html, an evolution.master file from that index.html file that I imported before. One thing to note, if you do it this way, and you're working with HTML files, don't ever edit the master file. If you edit the master file, the .master, it invalidates the HTML, and now you can only use the .master. Right? So if I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to edit the HTML, I always stick with the HTML. If I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to edit the .master file, I'm always going to edit the .master file. Okay? Don't touch it. They don't tell you that up front either. Like they give me those two, and they tell me to map, and I think, oh, a master page. Let me just look at what, even looking at it, if you change one thing, it'll invalidate it. Another thing they gave us, that image that I showed you of what our site looked like, our page looks like when it uploaded and converted, that's called a preview page. Okay? So we can use a preview page to display any page in our site and show me what my new design looks like in that page. Remember back when we were doing 2010 and we were doing themes, right? And we got to do that preview, and it only showed us the home page of the publishing site that by far had not all of the styles. Guess what? This allows us to select any page. We put our own URL in there, and then it previews that in it. It's great because for me, in doing this, I put in a team site, and I have publishing pages, and guess what? I get to see what they all look like. Here's what a preview page looks like. By the way, this is that same master page that I showed you before uploaded after I've started manipulating it and changing it to work with SharePoint. It's a little different. So here's the code snippets, right? I told you we used our little snippets right here. By the way, here's where you could change and add your different preview pages in there. But we're going to make use of the code snippets to take our master page from that other look, that straight up HTML, to actually using SharePoint. So here you can see in this one, I've changed the top navigation to use SharePoint. I've added in my content area to use SharePoint. I have not done the left navigation, right? That's still my HTML left navigation. So I can go into my code snippet, right? And they give us a lot of options. So within our code snippets, we have navigation selections. We have our top navigation. This is our left navigation or vertical navigation. I love how they give it all like 4 names. So here's our quick launch, our left nav, our vertical navigation. In here, preview doesn't really work that well. I've tried it in a lot of different methods. It doesn't work that well. Here's our HTML snippet, but guess what? It also gives us a little WYSIWYG down here where we can customize it. So we can change colors, we can change behaviors, those dynamic display levels that we used to have to go into the master page to change to show more drop downs, all of that. We can change that here, and then we hit update, and it changes our code snippet. So then we copy our code snippet out to our clipboard, go into our desired HTML editing platform, which, by the way, I've used almost all of them to do this. I have even used Notepad, and it works well to do this. As long as you like code and you can figure out where you are, Notepad will work. And you take this out, you copy it out, and you paste it into the desired location in your HTML file. Poof. We like to think poof would work. And then we realize that we're probably still going to have to edit some CSS if we really want to highly customize it, right? Because as much as it allows us to customize it here, and you'll notice it actually gives us an option to define our own CSS class. We've never been able to do that before with some of these unless we really wanted to spend a lot of time. But now we can define our own CSS class in it. We get other options, so we get some of our administration stuff, by the way, in code snippets, site title, site logo, sign in, edit mode, some of our containers, device channels, security trimming. We get some custom, so if we want to create our own custom code snippet, custom controls, things. And then we have web parts, where if we want to put web parts directly in there. So you get a lot of code snippets. I tell you, there's some pretty big code snippets that are missing. So I have made use of that custom .NET markup to put actual SharePoint functionality back into it. So when you do that, and you've converted and you've started playing around with it, the biggest one that you're going to think, where's that? I can't find it, is going to be the ribbon and the main content placeholder. Because if you look back at this code snippet, there's no ribbon and there's no main content placeholder, right? Well, guess what? That import actually added those in there. So if you go open up that HTML file, it has actually added in the ribbon and the main content placeholder in divs. So you kind of go start searching for them. They're really easy to see if you're working with something like Dreamweaver that does have a design preview. And I'll show you why as soon as we open that up. But they're easy to find. They're not that hard. And a lot of people thought when Microsoft said you could use Dreamweaver and when they took SharePoint Designer, the design view away, that it was going to make it impossible. So they actually coded these things to be like neon yellow in the design view. So when you open up this HTML file in your HTML editor, and I've tried it in most of them that have a design preview, and it's bright yellow. So you can see it, click on it, find it, move it around. It's actually fairly nice. So you can go in and look for it. It's in there. I don't have the screen of it. But see here is the ribbon. Now, the thing to note about this is when you're wanting to go in and look at these HTML files, make sure you get the one that you want to open out of the master page gallery. Right? Don't just open the one that you had on your desktop. You have to make sure you're pulling it from the master page gallery, and make sure you refresh that page view after your import before you start opening the files. A few little tips, because otherwise you're not going to have all this stuff that's been added into it. Okay, I'm actually going to demo it because it's actually pretty cool to see. Okay, so in here, I tried to open some of this up. Here is my master page gallery with one I've already imported. But we're actually going to go import another one first, just so you can see how that actually works. So here's the design manager, and this is all in Office 365, so this all works quite well. Now, I will say that as far as applying these master pages in Office 365, you do have to package it as a solution, right? So that is the one trick to doing that this way. But we're going to come down and we're going to edit master pages. And we're going to convert an HTML file to a SharePoint master page. We're going to work on it, because SharePoint's real polite these days. It says things like working on it, and it doesn't just sit there and spin anymore. So we're going to go down to the folder that I created that has this in it. And I kept the same folder structure that I typically would as I'm working in web design. I would have a folder, and then within the folder, images in my folder. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. And look, conversion successful. It added it right to the top of the list there, Evo Live. Right? So if we click on it, it's going to take us to that preview page. Looks great, right? It imported everything in. All of my custom controls, right? Oh, they're not really SharePoint, though. It's just what I coded it to be. Okay, here's my bright yellow div for my main content placeholder. Okay, this looks great. Looks like it's going to work. I think this is the right one. Right, here's my file, my page that has content in it. So if I come back here to my preview page and I say change, and I want to select an existing because the page already exists, I'm going to paste that URL in here, and I'm going to click OK. We're going to wait. Didn't change anything. But wait. If I scroll down a little bit, and scroll down a little bit more, look, there's my page. That's kind of suboptimal, isn't it? It's not really the desired effect of what I wanted. I designed this HTML site. I gave it content areas. I put fake content in it. A little frustrating. So I'm actually going to come back here, right? We're going to look at one that I've already started editing. So this, if you don't know how to open it in Windows Explorer, right? So this is my library in the master page gallery. They actually gave us a little cheat sheet right here. So this little icon over here in the Connect and Export, that's a window, like a monitor and a folder, is open with Windows Explorer. So I've actually already opened it because it works about every 3 times out of 5. And so here is my path down to my custom folder in the master page gallery, right? So I'm going to come in. I'm going to open this with Dreamweaver. Crazy. I never thought I'd be using Dreamweaver for SharePoint, but, hey, something new every day. Okay. Try to make it a little bit bigger. It doesn't really want to let me, but that's okay. So there's my ribbon, right? If I scroll over, because I already edited this one, there's all these icons in there, right? Little SharePoint things that it added in. Of course, my laptop's going to be really slow, right? It's going to tell me things like you don't have JavaScript and all of this kind of stuff, right? So here is all of that. Here's my search box. But I want to change this left navigation. I want to use the SharePoint left navigation, right? I don't want to use the one that I stubbed out as a list. So I'm going to go back over here to my HTML master over here. I'm going to go back to my list. By the way, it doesn't give you a great method from getting from that preview page back to this. Because I don't know why, it just doesn't. So we're going to open up this because that's the way to get to the snippet gallery. We're going to click on snippets. And we're going to come in and we're going to look at our vertical navigation, we think. Okay, so here's our vertical navigation. I'm not actually going to change anything, but if you come in here and look, you can set up all kinds of different CSS changes and all of that, right? So I'm just going to copy this snippet to the clipboard. And then I'm going to come back over to Dreamweaver. I'm going to try my best to select all of this. Delete it out. And then I'm inside of a div. So guess what? I'm going to paste that code snippet in there. Right? And so then it's gone away. No more preview, right, of what we had. But if we come and we save it, because we opened this from SharePoint, right? You see our path up there is to our master page gallery. This is why I use Visual Studio, because Dreamweaver likes to not respond a lot. It'll eventually save, and we'll go refresh the page. Come back out here to our page, and we refresh. Now it's using the left navigation. But you'll notice something. It's not styled like the SharePoint left navigation. Why is that? Because I left my wrapping div that contained the link to the CSS for that left navigation around it. So my CSS file that I set up for my HTML that it imported in with it, because it's in the same folder, right? It's linked through my master HTML file, contained styles for that left navigation. So I didn't have to change anything. I just had to wrap it with it, and it goes through and applies it. Why does it apply it like that? Because the left navigation is still a list, and there are still links. So my CSS that I did, old school HTML that had the div and then the list and the links and all of that in it, still goes through and applies to my left navigation, right? So they made it halfway decent, right? So it still pulled it through. So you can really work with that HTML and make it work. And I can still go into that CSS file and edit it, make changes, and it will still apply through this. Now, I will tell you there are places that you just want to go back and use the SharePoint CSS because it's easier, but it does work. You'll notice it even applied my little custom sizing on that image down there because that is the default edit links circle. But I had one in there that told it what size to be, and so it went in and made it that size. So you can do it. And it can pull in and work. You see, there's our whole left navigation. So it can apply pretty well, right? It's not too bad. We have to do a lot of that, though, to make our other one work, that one that we can pull in. Guess what we have to do? If we want it to have all of that columns and the styling, we still have to create the page layout for that does that and holds that styling. Why? Because our SharePoint content loads in that main content placeholder. So we would still have to go into that HTML file and remove all of that crazy column and div and everything we did there, move that into a page layout, put that content placeholder up there, and then put the page layout on top of it. All right? Design Manager has some great advantages. And I'm going to leave it at that. Okay. So after we've done all our work in that, right, what do? We spent all this time, we've invested all this energy in this HTML file, we've put all our snippets in there, we've configured it, we've customized it. Now how do I actually apply it, right? So if you're using publishing, we can do like we've always done and go through and set the system in the site master and apply it throughout. The other thing that you have to note about this is using the Design Manager in order for anything to appear in the listings for you to do the drop-downs, whether it be, you could do this the same way if you're wanting to create your own HTML and master page file for the composed looks. You could do the same way that we just did that, right? but you have to publish everything for it to appear. Right? They want us to tell it that it's final. So you would just go into the master page gallery and publish, and then it'll appear for us to be able to select it. So that's why we could go in and apply that to our list, our master page, like we always have done, right? Underneath look and feel, pick our custom master. What else do we do? We can put it together as a composed look, right? That is the HTML, the master, the preview, the SP color, and the SP font. You can also have the background image, depending on what you're going to do. People use a lot of background images for public-facing sites. Again, that same little listing. One thing to note for that SP color and that SP font file, if you were in Heather's session earlier today, Heather and Penny, they use SharePoint Designer to get there. Guess what? I don't even have SharePoint Designer installed anymore, and I can still do it. You go into the theme gallery, and underneath 15, that's where you can load them. You can upload them right there. You don't have to open it in SharePoint Designer if you don't want to. Like I said, I don't use it. I use Visual Studio and Dreamweaver. So here's my custom one that I uploaded. So that's where they live if you're doing it through the browser. All right, here's my custom one that I created. You can apply it. You'll notice I did not create a custom preview file. I don't actually see a ton of value in creating a custom preview file. Why? Because I'm not going to let people go select and change it. I'm going to have somebody that's an IT pro or the branding who's got design rights go in and change it and apply it. And so I already know what it looks like. I don't need the preview to tell me what it looks like. So I don't actually create them, but you can create them. I'm actually going to skip ahead to that and then go back to the CSS one. So there's a great article on MSDN that tells you how to do this because it's not as easy as it would seem. It is an actual .preview file extension. You must use an HTML editor to edit it. I tried it in Notepad. It didn't work very well. Didn't like it. It was really confusing to understand. It's made up of 3 components: default color palette, default font scheme, CSS, and then it's got the HTML. You have to go in and tell it the font scheme. You have to go in and tell it the colors. You have to tell it your HTML structure. You have to tell it some of your CSS for it to build that preview. It would be so much easier if they just made it an image, but it's not. So there's a great article out there on MSDN on how to do it. Okay. So with that color palette, remember we talked about how we could create a color palette for a composed look and what it is. It's kind of like our old, and all our old themes where we, that last version of themes, where we selected all those crazy colors, those really specific colors, you know, accents 1 through 6, and text background, dark one, light one, all of those. Yeah, so it's kind of like that again. It does support RGBA, so it's transparent. You can use transparency in it. The great thing about this, though, is that I can actually reference those color, SP color names in the CSS. So if I'm creating custom CSS, I can reference one of those color names if I've set up a color palette. It's actually pretty cool, and SharePoint already does it. Hint, hint. This is a tool released by Microsoft. It's called the Theme Slots tool. It's really hard to find. I have a link for it on the next slide that you guys will get. It's one of those tools that they told us about at SharePoint Conference in Las Vegas, and then they kind of subtly released it and didn't really tell anybody. So if you didn't know somebody who knew somebody who tweeted about it or put a blog post out about it, you didn't know it came out. In fact, half the Microsoft people that I talk to don't even know what it is. And that's some of the people on the UX team, which kind of frightens me. But it's like any free tool from Microsoft. It works to a point, meaning that I can come in and change all of my colors, and you'll notice there are a lot of them, right? And I can change my colors, but guess what? It has a color picker that doesn't work. So if you don't know the RGB values of your colors, have fun. Because that's the only, it doesn't give us hexadecimal in that color picker. You could put the hexadecimal here, but if you actually want to click on that and like do a color picking, you do it through RGB. Hue, saturation, all those fun things. It's not the easiest thing to do. I just look up my hexadecimal color numbers and put them in there, and it will go out and create it. The great thing about this is it actually gives us the ability to do these little previews. So in that composed look where we have on the left side of it, the master page that we select and then the color palette, it lets us customize that, which is a little hard to do just in Notepad for the other file. So it's good, but it has its issues. It's a free Microsoft tool. Imagine that. And it saves it as a file. Saves it as the .sp color file extension. Which, by the way, if you're doing it in Notepad, it's going to save it as a .txt, and you're going to have to go rename it with that file extension, because that file extension doesn't exist. There's the little link to download it. Like I said, it's really hard to find because they don't even want to announce it themselves. I think they're a little embarrassed of it, personally. But that's how it works. So how do we do what we've done for years? Create custom CSS to go along with our custom master page. Guess what? They made it easier if you're doing HTML, because all we have to do is the standard link reference to a style sheet. Master page, we still have to do the CSS registration, CSS link kind of jazz. It works best that way. You can do this and it works, but if you're going to really highly customize and use a combination of publishing and team sites, I still use my CSS link instead of just the link reference. Here's an example of how the CSS, even the SharePoint stuff, uses those new palette colors, right? So remember in SharePoint 2010 when we opened up our CSS files and we thought for 2 seconds, oh, they commented it because it had these sections that looked like comments. And then we realized it was a cruel joke because that was the theme engine. Guess what? Those still exist. So here's an example, and you'll see it has replaced font now because we have our SP font file. And it just uses the theme font, and you tell it which of the theme font names. So within that font file, we had a title. And then the same color, replace color with theme color site title. So we don't have to remember accent 1 through 6.675 for the transparency, for the crazy colors that they used to create for us now. We can actually just use the same name that's from that color palette. Or, guess what? You can still do like we've always done and give it an actual hexadecimal. You can still do your traditional CSS for customizations the same way we've always done, where we create our own custom file, use the SharePoint classes, and actually customize them. Works. This is easy sometimes too if all I'm wanting to do is change a couple of colors. So how do we actually apply it? And with Office 365, it gets tricky, right? Because we don't have access to the server. In SharePoint 2010, I almost always on premises, almost always, very, very rarely, almost always put it in a solution. So how does that work here? Well, in SharePoint Online, Office 365, guess what? We can still package as a solution, right? This is what we now refer to as an app. And to me, it seems crazy that we're going to create an app for our branding, but really that's just the new fancy term for sandbox solution, right? It's a new way to do it. It's not exactly a sandbox solution because some of the framework's a little different. I will tell you, though, to package it up, if you're going to do this, more than likely you are going to need a developer if you're a web designer because some of it's a little tricky, right? But you can still package it up in Visual Studio as an app and deploy it into the solution gallery and apply it. Well, guess what? If I've used the design manager to go in and create it, right? I've created a composed look, I've done the HTML, I've spent a lot of time working in that. Guess what I can also do there? I can also, in that, package it from the design manager, export it out, upload it into my solution gallery, and activate it on multiple site collections. And that will work in Office 365. So, in Office 365, you either have to spend some time with the developer creating a sandbox app solution. The app fabric's a little bit different. Or you have to kind of grin and bear it and work with the design manager a little bit, feel a little bit of pain, and package it up after you're done there, deploys it as a solution, and goes from there. I will tell you that it doesn't allow you to select which files it puts in that package, right? So if you're going to do it, I would suggest that you go through and you have one site collection that you do all your development, your testing in, because you may have multiple files that I don't want in my new, pretty, brand new solution, right? And then I would kind of move that over into the master page gallery, and once I've done all that before, and I have that HTML already, guess what? If I then import it in, it still keeps all its SharePoint stuff that I've done, and then I have a fresh one to create as a solution and go deploy. So a lot of people have asked me, Office 365, how do I make it work? That's how you do it, right? You go through, use the design manager, package it up. You can use Visual Studio, package it as a solution. They work. Here's how you do it. It creates the package right here through the design manager, create design package. Like I said, it does not allow you to pick which files. So you give it a name. It can also include search configuration. So if you spend a lot of time configuring search, right, then I create it. My package is ready. I click there. I download it. Right? What do I do with it from there? Take it over to my solution gallery. I upload it into my solution gallery, and then I activate it. So this one's actually not activated. Once I activate it, I can go apply it. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a little bit of some of the theme stuff. Right? Because it is how a lot of people are going to be doing branding on Office 365. It is how most people I have talked to are doing, crazy enough. It is how most people that I have talked to are doing their public-facing sites so far. Right? They're doing composed looks. But they also aren't the ones that are doing multiple page layouts and all of that. This is a lot of people that have small businesses, and I want a couple of pages for my company online. I've got an Office 365 subscription. It gives me the ability to have a public-facing site. What the heck, right? A lot of people that are going highly customized are still hiring somebody in and doing the whole packaging as an app and going that route. So how does this work? Let's go look at them. So in site settings, our little change the look, right? Here's my custom one. Like I said, I did not go in on this one and do a crazy master page and try to deal with it. I really was more concerned with getting it working and getting all of the files there. But here, you'll notice I do have a custom, I did put in a custom master page, I just didn't change it. So in order to get it to appear in here, you have to upload it and publish it for it to show up, but now it is in my little listing of layout options. So we have our evolution composed look. And if we go back and we look at our master page gallery, here is my evolution composed master page. And guess what? In order for it to work, you do have to have the HTML, the dot master, and the preview. All right? So a lot of people are doing this. They're going through, they're customizing it. They're using SharePoint Designer to copy, change names, and customize these files. And they work really great. You can change up some of the layout, add in some conditional components, change in a logo, add in a header image, all of that. So there's our little change the look. I actually don't have it loaded up right now. So when you start looking for this theme tool that we tell you about, they call it the theme slot tool when you go start Googling for it, but the actual name of it's the SharePoint color palette tool. Right. So the hard thing about it is that it's going to load up, and you're going to see that they really didn't spend any time thinking about how this would display and render on the page because it cuts it off. But here are all those different buckets of colors. I like how they call them color buckets. It's just kind of fun. So here, if I come in here, like I said, if we go click on it, it gives me this great color picker, right? I think, oh, cool, I can click on it. Maybe I have to use this. Not really. I mean, it kind of works, but not really. Changes a little bit, but not a lot. So if you want to do that, you end up using these little slider bars, right? Or you type in your RGB colors. But it does have opacity, which is fairly cool. So we can go in and make it transparent. It was pretty cool. We weren't able to do that before. SharePoint didn't really like transparency, didn't like RGBA. But so that's that, right? So how did I do it before, though? I didn't actually go in and edit that way. So I have a little folder, and you'll notice in here, I've got an SP font, and I've got an SP color, right? So let's see what it actually looks like. What is it actually creating? Oh, that's right. I have to actually open it from here. So this is what it actually looks like. So how do I find those CSS names? Remember before that I talked about that we can use from this color palette in my CSS? They're right here. So I can come in and pick them out. Here's the name, there's the value. As far as finding what these associate to, I'll tell you I haven't found great methods for that. This tool that has the really fantastic icon down here, by the way, that really fancy, spancy theme tool icon, if it was actually loading where it would let us do it, here you can see this little UI preview. Here it actually kind of starts to tell us what some of those items are. You can start to guess from what this is as to what it corresponds to here. Still not great. There's nothing that's mapped these yet. None of us have sat down and mapped these out for you, and we apologize. Only slightly. But, I mean, there is this great option, and it looks like it's a smaller amount of things that I have to define. Looks like it, right? SharePoint is still one of those things where they still gave us a master page that seems like it's overly inflated. They gave us CSS that seems like it's overly inflated, right? And if the CSS class names still don't make sense, and the div IDs still don't make sense. If we come in and look, also, if we look at some of this code snippets that we've placed in here, right? If you start looking at them, that's the main content area. Let's see if I can find one of the navigation ones. Here's like my search box, right? It's a lot of stuff. It's not a small code snippet. That's the end of the code box snippet. I mean, it's a lot of stuff. And you go in there and you look at it and you're like, that seems kind of big. Well, remember, they're trying to take something that in our master page is like a 3-line ASP content placeholder control area and make it HTML. So they're having to embed all of that in there, and they're having to give you error messages like I have down there that says your browser doesn't have JavaScript, right here. Right? All of that is included in this code snippet of HTML. So if we were going to go try to write our own code snippets from the HTML, it's kind of hard. Now, if you are looking for some of the other SharePoint code snippets that aren't in that snippet library, there are more out there. Some people have blog posts on that. I know a couple of people that are actually working on, because when you go to get those, it's actually just the code. It doesn't actually tell you what it is. You don't need to know what it is, right? It's just trial and error. You paste it in there and see what it does. So they're actually working on some projects to actually make a code snippet library that houses all of them and tells me what they are and what the customizations are that I can do within that code snippet. But I don't know how far along they are on that particular component. So I guess that kind of goes through a lot of what I wanted to cover. The master pages are still the most powerful tool that we have. You can still customize them. You can use custom master pages for Office 365. The trick is, how do you deploy them? You can easily do them like we've always done. For myself, I do it in Visual Studio. I package it up as an app. I go in and then I'm simply going to my Office 365. Let's see if I have it here. I would go in. How do I do that these days? It's under here. So it would still be a feature, right? And I would still go in because I've packaged it up. I've put it in there. And I would go in and manage it the same way I've always done and apply it throughout, right? You can do that in Office 365. You can do that for Office 365 on public-facing sites, okay? It's not one of those things where a lot of times you look at it and you're like, Office 365, oh, I'm going to be very limited. You are limited, but if you want to spend the time and do the level of effort on it, you can do it. The trick to know with Office 365 is all one site collection. So you have to be very careful about what types of customizations you put in there because you're going to start running into performance issues the more you do. And a lot of people, if you're doing it through a Microsoft tenant, you may not have your own dedicated server. So you may be hosting with other people. So then you start to, if I put in tons of jQuery and JavaScript, I may start running into performance issues because it's trying to run all of that and I'm not the only person on that server. Anybody have questions?